This is SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. I am your host, Todd Kirk. I'm joined by my very jacked up Casey Trujillo co-host and one of my favorite people, Ashley DeKerlegand, who is just one of the best humans I know. And Ashley, we are super pumped to have you on. This is Ashley's second time on the podcast. And so if you didn't hear her podcast episode, a little over a year ago, go back and listen to that. But we're pumped to have Ashley back. Ashley, so good to see you today.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Well, and I think another point off of this, TK, is depending upon our audience and the year they were born. If you're older like myself, you just said that I was an extremely crazy person. Being jacked up is, in my day that wasn't a good thing. For our Gen Zers, jacked up, that was a great compliment, and they think I'm working out a lot. So either way, Todd, you gave me a okay compliment there.
I like to keep the audience guessing if you're crazy or just really strong. So
now,
maybe a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. Before we get started with Ashley, if you are a returning guest, which actually is the first one, we take you to Utah, we take you to Bryce Canyon, and you get to go hiking with Todd and I. So Ashley did that recently. Ashley, what was your feedback of Bryce Canyon? Tell the audience, if you haven't been to Bryce Canyon here in Utah, Ashley, describe what it was like. What did you think?
Oh my goodness. It's one of the most gorgeous places I've ever been. I will say two things. Maybe be in a little bit better shape than I am right now, which the bar would be low because I don't really exercise. So maybe be in a little bit better shape and then wear shoes that have better traction, like hiking shoes. But it was extremely fun. And Casey and Todd were very patient with me as we made our way back up the mountain.
Awesome.
We live at elevation, though, so we're basically mountain goats. So
seriously, Ashley lives at no elevation, and then she's going, what, Todd, was it 5,000? What's the elevation at Bryce?
Are you kidding me? Dude, it's like 8,000. It's like 8,000 feet. It's 8, really high.
Feet. It's so high.
Blaming on the lack of oxygen then.
Well, Ashley, one of my favorite books, again, I'm on the sales side, so one of my favorite books is The Challenger Sell. And one of the things that they teach you in sales is you got to do the triple T's. You got to teach, so introduce a new concept, which makes people hopefully curious. And then we tailor that messaging, and then we take control. So we show that we are the experts and say, okay, understanding where you're at, let me tell you the challenges you're going to run into. Let me show you how this could work, and here's my recommendations. Ashley, you're going to introduce a framework to us today, and what I love about it is it really vibes with the Challenger Sell. As you explained this to us as we were driving out to Bryce Canyon, I was like, oh man, we got to have you on to explain this. Obviously, this is tailored to customer education folks, but I believe if you're in CS or just even in customer experience, the concept that you're going to go over today is going to be super valuable because it's going to help you teach, tailor, and take control. So, Ashley, introduce this framework and maybe just the high-level concepts of why it's something that when you're creating an education course, this is something you're thinking about.
Sure. Yeah. And all the credit has to go to Kathy Moore, who I believe she started out as a technical trainer at IBM, but she started working on this action mapping framework back in the 1980s. She actually realized that marketing is, they always kind of run with metrics, or at least at IBM they were. So they were running with at a business goal and metrics. And she was like, well, with training, we don't really do that. We just kind of do information dumps. And so what she ended up doing was creating this action mapping framework that focuses on what do people need to do rather than just what do they need to know. So she starts with a measurable goal, like increase sales by 15% if we launch this new product. And then she just IDs all the behaviors that drive those specific outcomes. And what I love about it too, is it really helps you determine that training isn't always the answer. So a lot of times performance problems aren't even knowledge gaps. They're just, maybe you lack the right tools. Maybe your manager's not giving you enough time, so you're having to skip steps. Maybe it's something wrong with the UX in the product of why people can't, use that new feature. So I really love that it just drives behavior change and it moves business metrics, and it doesn't just look at completion rates.
Okay, so I've always loved the idea of helping people focus more on the actions and the behavior change that drive the results. And so, I guess, so where do you start with this action framework? Because it sounds like the idea is you identify a measurable goal, and then you kind of work backwards to then identify all the things that drive to that. And so, is this something that you've already started to implement, Ashley? And if so, what have you seen that has worked to help you identify and start mapping out things for yourself?
Yeah, it's I have been implementing it. We actually use a template that we go through with our SMEs when we have a SME, like a CSM manager will request a project that we need to do. Like recently we just implemented Gainsight, and so we needed to create some enablement on that. So instead of just kind of going at, well, what do they need to know how to do in Gainsight? It's like, what do they actually need to do on a daily basis to be successful with our customers, to compress churn, to increase our retention rates, upsell. So those were we kind of looked at specific use cases of like what that CSM is doing in Gainsight in order to drive up business metrics, and not just like, well, if you need to create a CTA, you go here and click this, click this, click this. It's not an information dump. So we're trying to incorporate it in as many projects as we can. And we've really even seen it be successful outside of instructional design. You can kind of do it for any sort of project that you're working on where you have some sort of deliverables to do. So we've been working closely with GTM enablement, product marketing, all of the teams that are in charge, even sales enablement and CX enablement, customer education. So all the teams that are in charge of like our go-to-market strategy. And it just helps us figure out exactly what content needs to be created by each team, and not just, what product training or feature information we need to do. And I love it because it really assesses Bloom's taxonomy. So our higher order thinking skills. It's not just like they need to know this, they need to understand this or memorize this, but they need to be able to go and take that information and do something with it. And it needs to be something that is observable, like an observable action that they do. I think that I used to work at a shipyard, and I was on a safety task team. And this was before I even thought about instructional design or teaching training. And I think I realized we were using action mapping without even knowing what it was, but it's about, we were trying to create training as a safety task team to eliminate, hopefully, safety incidents. So I think when you look at it somewhere like that, rather than just saying, well, we want people to be safer, rather than looking at that as the goal, it's like, well, what's the measurable goal? Like, okay, our safety incident rate right now is at 10%. We want to lower it to 5% by doing these things. And you can take baby steps. Obviously, we don't want any accidents, but we need to find out why people are not being safe or why these accidents are happening. And it's not just because of, let's not just throw information at them.
Okay. Ashley, I think you dropped like 20 nuggets for people to consider and think about. So that's the hard part, is I'm going to try to choose one that I really love, because you had so many in there that was beautiful and amazing. So the first thing is a concept. I think it was Chris Lee. Shout out to my guy, Chris Lee. If you're listening here, is he taught a concept. And I don't know if he came up with this or if somebody else came up with this, is he said, don't be lazy. And so everybody's like, of course, you don't want to be lazy, because let me define the acronym LAZY for you. And it's lots of activity, zero yield. To him, that was lazy, because it didn't result in anything. You're just doing a lot of activity, right? And so I think that's one of the things that you just went through, this action mapping, where people on the other end, again, if I'm in customer success, you're like, of course you need to, cause action. But then think about your goal. So, okay, if I want to renew 100% of my logos in the next quarter, okay, that's what you want to do. But how are you actually going to get there? And I think that's where people break down. They come up with lots of activity, but it's not the activity that's actually going to drive the action that you're looking for. It's just activity to tell your boss, yeah, look what I did. I did this. I sent out this email. Then I did this. Then I did this. Then I did this. The hard work, in my opinion, is actually saying, here's where I want to go. And through data feedback and a little gut instinct. Let's not rule that out. Here's how I'm going to get to that goal. These are the actionable steps that will drive that. Now, Ashley, in this action mapping, you talk about a concept that I don't think a lot of people do. And it's around, well, what will be the challenges that you or your customer might run into when they try to perform this action? You're going to have, in sales, again, going back to the challenger sell, it's like, where are the landmines? Where are the things that are buried under the ground that if this customer goes down this path, that's what's going to happen. So you need to make them aware of that. Now, whether they choose to walk over it, that's up to them. But I need to make you aware of that. So Ashley, how have you done that? Could you give some examples going through this action mapping of where you've discovered challenges? And then how do you uncover that for the person to say, look, here's a challenge. What do you want to now go do with that? So that was a really, really long ramble right there. So Ashley, make it all make sense.
Yeah, I think like one of the best examples I have in recent history was just a few months ago. We have billable employees. So they have to hit a certain number of billable utilization, and there are implementation consultants, and they are exceeding billable utilization because one, we can never say no to a customer. So they're always going above and beyond, which I love about them, but it can also be kind of a burden. But they were not tracking their time. So it looked like that their utilization was much lower. So I got with the project manager that manages her PMs, and they were the ones that, we were kind of struggling with implementation consultants and PMs to track time. And I just had a focus group with the groups of people, the learners. And instead of teaching them, like what we had done initially was we gave them step by step, here's how you go through and track your time. And it took us, I think we did as much as we could. We did video, step-by-step tutorials, like all this stuff trying to help them. We're like, why are they still not doing it? Turns out it wasn't even the fact that like the training, like that was good. The tutorials, they knew how to do it. It was the fact that they weren't sure exactly what was billable and what wasn't. So like, what do we do for that? Well, we went in and we just created a quick like list, like a spreadsheet. Here's many of the activities you do, and here's what's billable. Here's other activities they're non-billable. Right there, that cut out a ton of the questions that they were asking to managers whether or not this was billable. Then they had to wait for the managers to get back to them, and by then they had moved on to the next thing. Another thing that they were not doing was they just didn't even know about like categorizing their Outlook meetings into billable and non-billable categories. So it wasn't even the fact that it was like a lack of that we didn't give them enough step-by-steps. It was really just that the environment had made it difficult for them. Another factor for that was they were having to track their time in 3 different systems. And so since then, thankfully, we were working on an improvement for that during this adoption process of time tracking. But now, since we've consolidated down to one system, that has saved a ton of the problem. But what I really felt good about was we were able to, myself as a trusted learning advisor, was able to point out to the management team, hey, it's not really your people's fault. Like this is actually a problem with our environment, and it's causing people to not be as motivated or just frustrated, and they actually are getting the work done. So since we've fixed that, the utilization has like skyrocketed. Now we've realized, they really are doing more than, they're exceeding expectations for the most part. So
okay, I love that example, and but all I could think about that whole time, Ashley, is like, okay, so one of the nuggets that you took away, or that I took away when you were first talking, was you mentioned this idea of like when you were rolling out Gainsight, and you're like, well, we could just be like, what do you need to know about Gainsight? Right. But when you say, okay, well, what are the things you need to do to actually reduce churn? Now all of a sudden it changes what you would focus on and what you enable your user with, and so. Like your example here of like, what do they need to accomplish and what are the things that are going to get them there in the fastest route possible? So like, I love you mentioned the idea of Outlook and their calendars and how they're going to update those. So like, as an example, if I wanted to go out and teach someone how to use Outlook, I could just be like, what are all the things that somebody needs to know about Outlook? And I could make I could easily fill up a full 8-hour curriculum with information about Outlook. Right. And I teach you a whole bunch of it. And you'd probably walk away with 15 minutes, maybe, that was like super valuable for you. But if I were to like go to Casey and say, Casey, you in sales, you're constantly sending responses out to people. What if you wanted to reduce the amount of time it took you to reply? What do you think would be the most impactful thing to help you to respond within 24 hours instead of 48 hours to your prospects? What would be the biggest impact there? Now all of a sudden it's kind of the same thing, right? I'm still like, you could easily look at that and say, well, I might end up teaching a lot of the same stuff, but I've now also removed anything that's bloat or that would distract. So in your mind, is this action mapping framework more powerful to create clarity and focus in what you need to accomplish? Or is it more helpful because it's easier to then correlate or get attribution for the impact that you're driving? Or is it both? Like which one do you think is actually more meaningful?
It's for sure both. And then one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to implement it is kind of selfishly for my team is, and I had just read this book called Trusted Learning, or Becoming a Trusted Learning Advisor, but it talks about moving, like the enablement and education teams at tech companies, especially moving from order takers to trusted learning advisors. So we were getting just inundated, which we still kind of are. We get inundated with requests to create enablement, like, oh, we just built a new QuickBase app that we're going to be using, so we need to train all the end users on it. And that's the only detail on that request I get. And so we've created, actually had one of my instructional designers, she had a great idea to create like this canvas just in Slack, like using their canvases. And now we do these scoping sessions with SMEs. So every time they put in a request, we have a half hour to an hour with them, or we try to as much as possible. And we just walk them through, forcing them to give us a business goal, a measurable business goal. And if they can't by the end, then I'm going to backlog that project or deprioritize it. And so that's been one of the biggest things that's really helped. And it also helps with my metrics too, because I found that my team and I were creating a lot of content that really wasn't having a massive impact on the business. And I think, like, as customer education leaders know, we're constantly having to explain the value and like over and over again to our leadership. And so if we're not focused on the highest impact projects that align to like our revenue targets, then you're going to be creating a ton of content that's not going to be useful or impactful or visible.
Lots of activity, zero yield. Like, it's just money.
Exactly.
What Chris Lee talked about, because again, you think about the cost of doing all of that content or whatever you're producing, right? And then no utilization. Oh, killer. But actually, here's the problem. I'm on the sell side. My customer just asked for this content piece. I need you to deliver this tomorrow so I can get this deal. Actually, just get the job done. It doesn't matter if they use it or not. Actually, how do you overcome that, of the impatience of the people asking for this help? Because again, don't think of this as just customer education. As a CSM, think about the requests you get. I know that as I've interviewed CSMs, you're like, oh my gosh, they give us so many different KPIs to try to go accomplish our job. Which one do you want to focus on? We don't even ever talk to the customer because we're doing so many internal things. How do you become a challenger and push back to say, we're going to do a scoping call? Because I'm pretty positive, actually, there's not too many people that want to jump on and do a scoping call. They just get the job done. I just told you what the person wanted. Don't you trust me? Don't you believe me? How do you handle that, Ashley?
Yeah, I kind of wish you hadn't asked that, because then it makes me, because I am still struggling with that. I'm still struggling to tell like salespeople and other people, like, no, you really don't need that. You just think you do. We need to change like how this is delivered. So it's a massive like culture change, and it has to happen across our whole business. And thankfully, with like our CCO, Kelly Hall, that's you've been on, she's been on your podcast. Our CX team, like, we now own that. The CX org now owns like the roadmap for all of CX. And we have people in ops that are like ensuring that every project that comes in, we track it in Jira. We make sure that it is aligned to an epic, which is on the roadmap of, it has to be on a high priority project on the roadmap. So that has been the biggest help, I would say. So between like my manager and the CCO is like ensuring that we're getting better at saying no, but also making sure that our work is visible on the company roadmap and not just like my own team's roadmap.
That's awesome. Tiki, let's stay on this for a little bit. Would you mind? Let's discuss this a little bit more. I think she just talked about a huge thing, executive sponsorship. if you're going to implement something like this, you better have the backing of executive sponsors. And what executive sponsors care about is increasing revenue, reducing risk, reducing expense, right? Those are the three things that they care about. TK, what are some other things that you've seen as you're trying to, again, do what's best for everybody, but it is a pushback? Todd, what's some feedback or some things that you've seen work?
Well, I want to hit on another thing that Ashley mentioned, because it's not just having executive sponsorship. It's one of the things that I think can be really difficult is it feels like you're fighting ghosts. And what I mean by that is the thing that you feel like, let's say you're Ashley, right? I'm putting myself in Ashley's shoes for a minute. We see the issues, we know the issues, we want to fix the issues. You're trying to educate and support the people who are out there, kind of opposed to this whole idea. Well, one of the things that's really hard is the thing that you feel in your gut, like, might be right, but it's very difficult to demonstrate that to people. And so one of the things that I love that she mentioned is, like, we're tracking everything in Jira, we're tagging everything really clearly, because when you do that, now all of a sudden it becomes easier for you to paint the picture for the people who are outside. And so I think that's a really important point, is how do you make it tangible and real for the audience that is asking the question? Because if you're not really good about helping bring them along with you, what tends to happen, I don't know if you run into this or not, Ashley, but if you just start telling people no, as an example, then all it does is make you sound like the person who just wants to say no. Yeah, and then they become grumblers. They just constantly are, oh man, this team never wants to help. They don't want to get behind me. And it becomes this issue of me versus them. And so the idea of making it really visible and real and tangible is I think really important. But and I don't know if you figured this out or not yet. I don't know if I figured this out, but I think the challenge can be like, well, if all you're doing is presenting data, then that can also sometimes create this scenario of, like, you're trying to just, like, beat them into submission to take your side. And so, like, how do you balance that? Because you want to make it real, you want to make it tangible so that they can see the problem and understand why. So then maybe it becomes this collaboration together. But what have you seen works there so that you don't turn into a, like, me versus you type scenario?
But I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a big reason why I'm so terrified of saying no to people, because I don't want to be a no person, and I don't want to appear like a Debbie Downer. I always can reference SNL. But one thing that I love about the action mapping too is, like, really encouraging, like, if we have a new project, and I'm still struggling with this a little bit at the company, but it's getting better as I'm socializing action mapping, is with GTM enablement. So, like, we work with product marketing, product sales enablement, CX enablement, and customer ed. And I run the CX enablement and customer ed piece of this. But they all are running at their own priorities. And one of the biggest issues we have is I'm very reluctant to push out product training on a feature that's in closed or open beta and it's not GA, because I get very worried if there's still limitations on that feature and it's not operating exactly as we are saying it's going to when it goes to the general public, then it's actually can be a blocker to adoption, and then it will harm that feature, in the future. And so I like to work with, I was like, okay, we have this new project. I'm going to create this training exercise. I don't really talk so much about the measurable business goal because I don't want it to intimidate them, kind of like what you said. But I will bring people into the meeting and we'll just be like, let's look at all of the potential blockers to adoption. And that's where you've got, like, tech support's voice, you've got product voice, product marketing, sales enablement, and you have SMEs on this. And because a lot of times it's been this kind of battle between product and myself where they're like, well, just train them on it. You need to train them on it. It's going out in beta. And I'm like, but if it's not ready, so it's uncovered. When we look at the blockers to adoption, Kathy Moore has you bucket them into, like, 4 different categories, and some of them it may be training, like knowledge, skills, motivation, even maybe they're just not motivated. Like they're not excited about AI. So why would they want to use AI photo insights that we're coming out with? But some of it also too is environment. And environment has allowed product to see without us explicitly having to tell them that the feature's not totally ready. Product's been able to see, hey, like maybe this is buried too deep down into the admin console. So we need to move this button up to make it, more available to people. It's also helped to realize like, okay, this feature, even though it's in beta, it's not really ready for us to have training because of these environmental limitations we have.
That's awesome. And Ashley, I think another thing I would add, the people that have done this to me, and Todd's really great at this because I work with him a ton, is Todd will say, okay, how is this going to be utilized? And I'm like, oh, geez, that's a great question. Yeah, how are they going to use it? They asked me for it, but how is it? Like, are they going to plan on launching like next week? Like, what's the give get that you've received on this? Because yeah, I can bump this up, but how do we know that they're actually going to push this out? Like, let's use this to your advantage. So Todd always does a good job of walking me back through it. Of like, Casey, how are you going to use this to help you move up your timeline? How are you going to use this to get to the decision maker? How are you going to get this to get the purchase order? How are you going to use this in a way that actually benefits you, Case? And I know that Todd cares about me. And so he's actually asking me that for a real reason, right? So I think that's one of the other things that I would add is if you're struggling with that, you want to push back, if your intention is, I do want to help, I do want you to win, then that comes through when you ask those type of questions of like, okay, how do we utilize this to help you win this deal? Well, I'm not there yet. Okay, so you're trying to gain some trust. Yes. Okay. How do we do that? And get on the same side of the table, because all of a sudden when you start to become curious, my wife just challenged me to this. She goes, we're going to stop saying the problem is or the challenge is, and we're going to start to say the solution is.
Oh, I love that.
So if I come and I say, hey, you know what? Gosh, our son, this is where his grades are at. Normally we go, well, the challenge has been, or the problem has been, and now we're like, so what would the solution look like? And then when we sit down with our son, that's the same question we're asking is, hey, right now you're here. So what does the solution look like to you? Because I just think your mind starts getting creative. Your mind starts thinking about possibilities. When you hold down sometimes what are the challenges, the problems, then you almost get negative. And you get in this headspace where you're not creative and you're like all stumped and you leave the meeting like, ugh. Right?
That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, and not to, kind of piggybacking off of your example of a child, I'm sure most of the people listening to this have children or younger siblings or somebody to babysit. So my daughter just started first grade, and this is her first year where she's got homework, and it's only like 1 or 2 worksheets a night, but it's still a lot. So I get her off the bus and then I come back, she sits in my office and I work for another hour or so. And I realize she's just sitting there. I'm in meetings looking at her out of the corner of my eye and she's not doing the work, but I know she knows how to do the work because she does it at school. And so I'm thinking, how can I use like maybe action mapping to figure out how I can get my daughter to do her homework, in the hour that I have left for work. And so I started kind of like doing a scoping session with her, but I was asking her, like, why can't you do it? She said it was because of me. I'm not helping her. And I was like, I know she knows the answers. After about a half an hour of back and forth, we figure out, and she tells me, she's like, well, I know what would solve everything. And she said, is if I had a desk like you. And so I ordered her a little children's desk, and I haven't built it yet. It's in the corner over there, but I'm putting it up in my office, and she's so excited to come home and do her homework there. And I know that that's not like a tech industry example, but it's just showing how you can really like look at the solution. Like you were saying, I like that because it helps be more optimistic. And typically the learner already knows what the solution is. You just need to ask them what it is. And that's awesome. Where I struggle with people not talking to their customers, because if you just go and talk to your customer, you can figure out what the solution is so much quicker than if like myself and product marketing and salespeople and everybody are sitting in a conference room for 5 hours trying to figure out what the problem is.
Oh, actually, you got me on one, and Todd's going to make a comment, but I got to speak up on this one. This one drives me bonkers. Don't say no for your customer. Don't say yes for your customer. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a CSM person. They're like, oh, this just doesn't look good. I'm not going to get the renewal, blah, 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 blah. And I go, hey, why don't we just show the data to the customer and say, hey, as you look at this, what's your initial reaction? And either way, you're going to find out what they're thinking, because you're going to build up a story in your head. You're going to exhaust your emotional bank count. And then you're not paying attention because you've already in your mind made up what's taking place. Whereas if you just go in there and say, okay, yeah, I've done my work, I've prepped. So either way they say yes or they say no, I'm ready to have a conversation, but I'm going to start with letting them speak. Oh, Ashley, that's money.
It's true. The thought that came to my mind is like one of the reasons why I love that you're worried, Ashley, about being perceived as a person who's going to say no, right? Or be the person who's just always focusing on the problem. The thing that came to my mind is like, what if instead of like when you see a problem, because one of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to avoid the problem, or you don't want to pretend the problem isn't there. But like Casey's point's a valid one. We tend to use the obstacle or the issue or the barrier or the frustration or whatever that issue, problem, challenge is. We use that as a thing to say, well, let's avoid it, right? Can we find a way around this? And what if instead we looked at it and we said, what if I could transform the problem into the opportunity? What if I could use the obstacle as a thing that becomes my new thing? So I love your example with your daughters, because you're transforming the obstacle into the advantage. And so I think that's a really cool way to think about it, is because like I love being about the solution, but I also don't want to pretend there's not a problem. So you got to find the problem, but then you got to transform the problem into the solution. You got to figure that out as to how do you make that how do I turn that into the new path forward?
Yeah, and the solution is, I want to say always, but that's maybe not true. Almost always. I think it might be always. The solution is always, falls under the higher order thinking skills of Bloom's taxonomy, because it's something that they have to do and not just know. So it's an actual behavior change, and it's not just throwing all this information at them. When I started working at the shipyard, I went through an apprenticeship program there. And for the first 3 months, we were in a classroom and we were just learning all of the little, like, what is the name of this knob on this piece of hardware? And then we would be tested on it. And then after 3 months, they're like, okay, you're ready to go out and work on the ship and do your inspections. And I could tell you the name of every knob on the piece of hardware I was supposed to use, but I couldn't tell you how to use it. So it's like, that was a perfect example of an information dump, and not us actually like practicing setting up the instrument and using it. And then it would have saved me from like breaking this expensive piece of equipment that I did that I broke. So it's, you can really apply action mapping to almost any problem that you have in life that needs a solution.
Oh my gosh. And that's part of the framework, right? Is providing the minimal amount of information, right? Think about it as a startup, right? We've all heard the concept of an MVP, right? The minimum viable product. What's the least amount that I can do right now to get people to see the big vision, so they're like, oh, I get this. I'm excited about this. And now we can start to work on that. Going back to you guys' example of Outlook, the number one request, and again, Todd, I don't know if this is still true, but when people were making a change to Outlook, it was usually, how do I set up my signature? Because I need to send email. I know I need to send email. Right. And the thing I got to have at the bottom is a signature. That's the most important thing for me right now, is how do I just freaking set up my signature? Or how do I create my out of office because I'm going on vacation, right? So it's like, it's the minimum amount of information that gives people confidence that that gets them to then want to explore a little bit more, right? So I love that concept of minimum amount of information that you're giving to somebody. Ashley, again, is that going back to, I know what the business outcome is, so I'm working that framework back of, okay, I just need to know how to download QuickBase right now. Like, unless I know how to access QuickBase, well, that's my first challenge. And then from there, do I understand how to create an app? That's maybe the next challenge. Is that how you map the information, is going from that sequence of kind of like a ladder? Or walk me through that. I've never done action mapping in this context. So how do you kind of make sure you're giving the minimum amount of information, is the question.
Yeah, so that's where I think like a collaboration, cross-functional collaboration, because that's another thing that action mapping has really done, is caused me to kind of move out of my little siloed world that I've been in with customer education and enablement. And it really has us like come together, even though we're, virtual and working remotely. It's just coming together and answering questions. So like not only like what are these observable, measurable actions we need to see people doing, but like why aren't they doing them? So why wouldn't they be putting their signature line? Is it because Outlook's button to add in your signature line is in a difficult place to find, or is it because they just need a step-by-step on how to do it? Or is it because they lack motivation? Do they not see the value in doing a signature line, which, I think for that point, but I also think, and to give y'all a shout out about your Copilot training, if you don't mind, but y'all already do the action mapping framework. And that's a big reason why I love taking your Microsoft Copilot training, because QuickBase, we ended up hiring like a third party to come in and train our company on how to implement Copilot. And it was an information dump. And I could not adopt it whatsoever. But then I stumbled upon one of your 10-minute courses, how to clear your Outlook inbox in like 10 minutes with Copilot. And that solved a very specific pain point for me, because I get upwards of 60 to 70 emails a day. And so that's my biggest struggle, is like managing my inbox. And so when y'all just address like those very specific pain points, and then also giving people the confidence, like you're great at giving people the confidence and motivation that they can do this. Like, hey, this is pretty easy. I'm just going to show you how to do it really quickly. So I love that part of your training too.
Okay, Ashley, you mentioned you did something naturally that I think maybe answers Casey's question. I'm going to try to just package it up really nice, because I love this. So if action mapping is really trying to connect a behavior change to an objective, right? Generally, what we do is we kind of are stuck in this kind of weird, messy middle piece where we don't know what the true objective is, and we don't know what the true behavior is, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, I think the answer is really simple. First, you got to get to the objective. And the way you get to the objective is you start asking why questions, right? When you ask a why question, you're like, why don't they use it? Why don't they use it? Why do they want to use it? And you start to identify, well, maybe they're not motivated. Why aren't they motivated? Because they don't see the value. Why don't they see the value? Because nobody ever reads it. Okay, why does nobody ever read it, right? And eventually you start to understand when you get down to its base level, you start to identify through the why question, what is the blocker, or what is the objective that we're trying to solve? Mm-hmm. The opposite is true. You ask a different question if you're trying to figure out what the action is, right? But you can't ask the what the action is question until you understand the true objective. But once you do understand the true objective, and let's say it's they really want to add the signature, not because they're not motivated and not because they don't know how to do it, they really want to add the signature, and they're frustrated they can't do it because everybody does look at the signature and it makes them look professional in front of their customers. And when they look professional in front of their customers, are more likely to close sales. And because they want to close sales, they really need that signature. So now, once you understand what the true objective is, then you go the opposite direction by asking how. And you say, okay, well, how do they need to do that? So to me, that's the simple way maybe to take this is, I got to identify the objective. I identify the objective by asking why. And once I truly understand the objective, that's when I can start asking how, because it's going to lead to a different direction. And then if you just start with how, because if you just start with how, you're going to start teaching stuff that's irrelevant and doesn't get you where you need to go. So would you say that's fair, right? You climb to the objective with the why, but then once you know the why, then you go back down with the how, and that's going to get you to where you really want to be.
Yeah, I love how you explained it that way. I've never even thought about it that way. But I think that's a very important point too. With the signature line example, I think it also, what I really love about it and working cross-functionally is it can even uncover like a lack of processes within a company rather than it being that person's fault. And so I'm always just big on like, you don't know what you don't know. And I think with as educators, a lot of us have, empathy. You have to have empathy as an educator. And so when somebody would tell me, well, I don't know how to do my signature line, maybe it's just that it's not that they're lazy. Maybe it could be, but it might not be that they're lazy, but maybe it's that like, this is their first job out of college and they've never had to put a signature line. So they don't know what the importance of that is. And maybe the company needs to have like a standardized template for a signature line. So like that could actually be the real problem. So I think that I've noticed too, when I do action mapping with other groups outside of my team, that it does invoke this kind of sense of empathy that like maybe people in product that are creating the product but are still distanced from the customers because they're not talking to them every day. It kind of gives them like, oh, I see why they might get confused on that, rather than just assuming they already know it.
Ashley, this has been an awesome conversation. Like this time has flown by. I'm going to ask one last question. Obviously, Todd always wraps us up, but Ashley, as you think about action mapping, sell me on it because I'm in sales. Why should I start to adopt this framework? Give me your little pitch of why. Give me the business outcomes, Ashley. Let's apply this here. Why would I want to start to utilize this?
So what I have noticed, and I think, I had one of my instructional designers, I'll give him a shout out, Madhusudan Rao, he's amazing. But he created our pipelines learning path, which is like considered typically a more difficult concept to learn in app building. But it was this 9-hour information dump that we had originally that we were doing. And Madhusudan, when we really went and scoped out all the work that needs to be done, initially he was just like, I'm never going to be able to do this. I don't know pipelines. I'm not a QuickBase app builder. I'm just an instructional designer. And as he was going through it, what he was realizing is how this was not only like decreasing duplicative work, but it was also making sure that everything that he was working toward was going to have a business outcome and a visible metric that it was going to be tied to. So it gave him more confidence even and satisfaction that he was actually doing meaningful work rather than just going in and creating this plan that was just going to go over every single possible piece of information you need to know about pipelines. And so in the 8 weeks that we've launched this new learning path, we have seen this absolutely, I've sent you all the metrics already, like this absolutely insane amount increase of metrics. Like our course completion rate has increased from 20% to 57%. So like, I think people need to see it like one time. So maybe do it on a smaller project like I did with time tracking, where it was like something internally, give that kind of proof of concept internally. And then you can work on something that's more, customer facing or impactful, like with the whole GTM enablement strategy. How was that? I'm not a salesperson, so I don't know.
Hey, you know what? Real life examples, I think, always land well for me. So Ashley, thank you for joining us. Okay. So here's the thing, Ashley, you've been on the show before. We always ask the same question at the end every time. So we've had this great conversation today, but it's therapy, right? We've gotten into some things that are difficult about work life. We've gotten some things that are difficult about parenting. So if you could give one homework assignment to our audience as a takeaway from our therapy session today, what would you ask our audience to do?
Oh gosh, I would say go try action mapping, and you don't have to go read I think it's a 500-page book. Don't do that. That was how I first found out about it, was in graduate school. Just go to Kathy Moore's website. You can literally Google action mapping, and she's got several learning aids like that you can just download or print out and try it on something as simple as like trying to get your daughter to do homework, and then see if it works, and just see, like, there's so many scenarios that you could do inside and outside of work life. If you feel like, oh, it's too overwhelming or whatever, all you're doing is just trying to solve a problem, and it's just giving you a framework on how to do that. So just see, something in your personal life, try to use it with that, and then baby steps into your business.
Oh, so good. Love it. Ashley, thank you as always for being with us. And thanks to everybody else who's joined us today. Ashley, if you don't know Ashley, go look her up on LinkedIn. She's great. Connect with her. She's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful friend of ours. So thank you again, Ashley. And thanks everybody for being with us again today. SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.